So, Samelys, you are running for Congress in the 15th congressional district. This is essentially the northern New York City, Bronx, primarily. And so, first off, give us a sense of like, what is that district? What can you tell us about the folks who live there, and how democratic it is? What the socioeconomic breakdown is?
Right. So I'm running in the 15th congressional district of the South Bronx, and the district is 97% people of color. It's a working class community. It's the most democratic county in the entire country, but it's also the one that's most heavily dominated by machine-style politics. So in terms of the issues that we're experiencing, we're known as the poorest congressional district in the country. So we have a lot of economic challenges. We have high rates of homelessness. We have an opioid crisis in the community. So, anything that you can imagine, the South Bronx has it. But one of the things that I say consistently on the campaign trail, even though we have very dire set of economic challenges, we shouldn't just define ourselves as the poorest congressional district in the country, because out of that struggle, we came out resilient. We came out a very beautiful community. We have been shaped by the history of the Young Lords and the Black Panthers here in the community back in the 70s and the 80s. So even though we've gone through a lot with the burning of the buildings that the landlords themselves in the 70s and 80s did to their own housing stock for the insurance money, we've come a long way since then. So, we're resilient and stronger than ever. So I'm really proud of this community and the prospect to represent it. And in terms of my platform, I'm fighting for a universal home guarantee, universal health care, universal child care, environmental justice as well, because this community has faced a lot of environmental racism over the past decades with bad economic policy choices that our political leadership has engaged in. It has brought in bad actors that have polluted our airs and basically taken over the lungs of our children. So we're fighting for a Green New Deal. And one of the most important things that our campaign is standing against is the influence of big money in politics. So I'm not taking any corporate money, any real estate developer money, or pharmaceutical money to finance my campaign, because we want to basically speak to the values and the needs of the community. So as it relates to me, I have personally experienced a lot of the issues that my community has experienced. I grew up in the homeless shelter system with my family. My mom was a domestic violence survivor, and that's why we ended up in that situation to begin with. And our experiences as a family are not unique. My mother also worked in sweatshops to make ends meet, and as a seamstress when she came to this country from Puerto Rico. So, our experiences are not unique. And certainly the experience of the congressional district that I hope to represent are not unique either, because many people in the country are experiencing similar things, especially with this pandemic taking hold of the coronavirus.
I want to touch on some of those issues that I see on your website at lopezforthepeople.com, but also the reports. Well, I want to talk to you about how one campaigns, in this environment, and also the reports that low-income folks, people of color, are suffering more during this pandemic, at least in this country.
Absolutely.
And I want to get to that in a moment. But before we do, just tell us. I mean, you've told us a little bit about yourself. You also have had, in terms of your upbringing in the district, and but you've also had a lot of experience, it seems to me, for someone who is as young as you are, in all sorts of politics and public service. You have a master's in urban planning. Tell us about your experience and how it prepares you for Congress.
Oh, absolutely. First, I would say that my lived experience is definitely something that, prepares me, because the policies that we've undertaken and the platform that we've undertaken in the campaign, it's basically giving respect to directly impacted people, because I'm a strong believer that directly impacted need to shape policy, and it cannot come from an ivory tower, and it cannot be imposed from the top down. Policy and organizing really has to take shape from the bottom up. And the most directly impacted that are experiencing these issues on the day-to-day absolutely need to have a seat at the table. So in my view, political representation should be about that, being intentional about creating that space for the movement to have a seat at the table, to create those laws that will benefit everyone's lives. So I would say my lived experience with oppression, witnessing oppression, basically guided me in the path of community organizing, and taught me from a very early age that we need to stand up for the underdog. We need to fight against injustice. And all the things that I ever, experienced led me on the path to community organizing, public service, giving back. I went on to Barnard College after I went to junior high school in the district. Then after college, I interned for Congressman Julian Serrano, actually. And I learned a lot from him in terms of the environmental justice movement, because he did a lot in terms of seeking guidance from the movement space on the ground and local activists to restore the Bronx River. So, I take a lot of my cues from my lived experience, professional experience. I was there with him for a little bit, and I moved on to work for his son when he was elected for city council. And I directed constituent services for a number of years. And I would help out with constituent housing casework and other kinds of issues that came through the office. And then what I would see when I would help out those people at the office secure things like one-shot deals at the welfare office to prevent them from being evicted, which are essentially one-shot grants when people are facing eviction, the same people 6 months, 7 months down the road come back to the office with the same issues. So then I was like, okay, it's a great experience working here, but I don't feel like I'm making a dent in terms of being a part of the creative process of building housing to prevent people from coming into this situation that I once was in when I was growing up. So I decided to get a master's in urban planning so I can learn about affordable housing development and affordable housing finance, to essentially learn how to put deals together and learn about financing to build housing from the ground up. So after I graduated there, I spent the next 3 years of my professional life in the affordable housing industry, working for not-for-profit developers in New York City that were building housing for people in vulnerable situations and people coming out of the shelter system. So I decided to choose the affordable housing industry because everything that I personally experienced in my life. And, I was a part of, a wonderful not-for-profit affordable housing space where we, built thousands of units for people, to live in dignified homes. And then on the side, I also did a lot of political organizing, community organizing. I became enamored with Bernie Sanders when he came on the scene nationally in 2016. As a young person at that time, I was taken by his message, and I still am taken by his message of social justice, the importance of building progressive movements and multiracial working class coalitions so that we can fight for the change that we want to see in our society and so that we can embrace transformative politics. So I co-founded an organization called Bronx Progressive that came out of the Bernie Sanders 2016 election, where we educated people about local politics and got them to run for positions like county committee and democratize political information so that directly impacted people and activists on the ground can take over the local Democratic Party and transform it. Because I feel that because it's so machine dominated, the politics here, sometimes this information, it's a little mysterious to get to. And if people want to run for certain party positions, like you don't know where to go. So we formed a collective to basically demystify the local political process and say, these are your respective party positions, and anybody that wants to run for these positions should run, and you don't have to ask the blessing of your local party boss to do so, because that's not the democratic way.
And that's,
so a lot of organizing around that. And, then obviously AOC, came on the scene. I met her during the Bernie Sanders 2016 election in the South Bronx, and we spoke and we met. Then when I found out that she was running for office, I invited her to come to Bronx Progressive meetings, and then as a group, we ended up endorsing her because she's a powerful woman of color who was not only talking the talk but walking the walk. And we did this before she won her primary in 2018, at a time where nobody in the city wanted to support a candidacy like hers because everybody was with the safe, comfortable establishment choice.
Right,
So
and
we
that's
decided to
and when you
lead
talk
with
about
our
the
values
machine,
and support her.
when you talk about the machine, she was going up against a part of that machine. I mean, literally, Crowley.
Oh yeah, a very big part of the machine, right?
Chairman of the Democratic Party, I think it was in Queens as well. And so,
Uh-huh.
so give me a sense. So, having done that, you have a tremendous amount of both lived and academic and professional experience in and around the issues that you're running on and issues of social justice, and in a district that desperately needs representation to get these type of resources and to get these type of plans going. Give us a sense of who you're running against, because obviously, if Joe Crowley could do a do-over, he would. A lot of those people would. I imagine. That you're running up against a sort of a similar type of establishment, but B, the surprise attack is not going to happen as in the same way this time around. That they now realize that this could happen.
Right. So the lay of the land is it's a very crowded primary. So I'm running for Congress along with a bunch of corporate Democrats and a Democrat who is actually a Republican in Democratic clothing, who's known for homophobic statements and is not for women's choice, women's reproductive choices. So that's kind of like the field that I'm, up against right now. So all of those candidates have histories taking real estate money, corporate PAC money, pharmaceutical money. Some of them have taken money from contractors that steal wages from workers. So in our campaign, we have definitely set ourselves apart because we've rejected that kind of funding. Because when you fundraise in a certain way, that's actually what shows to the community where you stand on the issues. So, we've taken that stance because I come from a working class background. I come from a very humble background, and I want to continue to honor those roots in my community and take those values to Washington. So, overwhelmingly in the door knocking that we were doing before the coronavirus epidemic took hold, that's one of the big issues that people in the district care about. They care about removing big money out of politics because right now this congressional district is experiencing a gentrification and a displacement crisis at all levels. So we cannot afford to send real estate, Board of New York candidates to Washington. We have to send working class champions that will put the needs of the community first unapologetically. And an important way to do that, a critical way to do that, is taking, rejecting this kind of money, from taking a hold over our democracy and our values and our needs in the community. So that's definitely something that sets me apart from everybody who's running in this field right now. And also, historically, I've been against rezonings. I've been against jail building. I've been basically on the side of the community the whole time while they use their platforms to, for other means, right? That haven't necessarily been uplifting for the community. So I take a community organizing approach to everything that I do. And I center the values and the needs of the community. And I see political representation as a way of holding myself accountable to the movement on the ground. Because like Bernie Sanders says, change never happens from the top down. It always happens from the bottom up. And I'm a believer in that. That's what we saw in the civil rights movement. That's what, we saw in the organizing that happened against Amazon and Queens. Organizing always happens from the bottom up. So I think that the responsibility of elected officials is to hear what's happening on the ground and create a space so that the movement politics and the movement activism that we see on the ground that are really the ones doing the work of change, so that vision can be translated into electoral power. So I think that's, the vision, that I have, that I've been fighting for, and the rest of the members of the squad, and Bernie Sanders himself. And I'm really sad to see that he's not continuing his race. I mean, I was ready to bat for him until the very end because I believe in him 110%. And what he did for me in terms of like educating me about politics, I mean, I've never met him personally, but what I know of him, he did a great service to me, and I'll never forget him. And I'll root for his policies, to the end. So that's kind of what we have. We need to move away from a transactional, broken political system and embrace the politics of transformation.
And so let me ask you this, and let's turn to this era of coronavirus, COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there is more and more information that is coming out, more and more data that is showing, I think pretty conclusively now, that the infection rates, that the mortality rates amongst people of color, particularly African Americans, but across the board, it seems, people living in low-income areas, is significantly higher than wealthier people, than white people. And I mean, the reasons seem to be, I think, fairly clear. It's two sort of two. It seems to me, and you tell me if there's something else that you notice. It seems to me there's two steps to this. One is that folks living in low income areas don't have the resources to work at home. They don't have a job maybe that they can work at home. They work low pay service jobs. They get forced to go in. They don't have the resources to say like, hey, wait a second, I can't go in. I'm not, this isn't safe for me. They also don't have the resources, to isolate themselves as they go in. They can't take, they're taking public transport.
This is completely right.
And then on the other side, you have underfunded hospitals in their neighborhoods. So the mortality rate is even going to be even higher relative to the standard mortality rate because they are not the medical. They either are underinsured or not insured, and the medical services are just not there for them. And so
maybe you should be running for Congress, Sam.
Well, no, I mean, look, the data's there. It's pretty clear. And it's horrific. And obviously, I think, we have a situation where, this is folks who are marginalized, folks who are low income are essentially the canaries in the coal mine. And, to extend the metaphor, there's deadly gas in the coal mine, and they are the first people who are going to feel it and feel it the worst. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, with that knowing, and I imagine that drives what you're doing, and it makes it makes even more sense of your campaign to people. But how do you get that message out when your campaign is not based upon raising big money, which means that you don't have the corporate donors who are saying like, we're gonna put you all over television, we're gonna put you all over the internet right now. How do you, when you have a campaign that is really designed in many respects to actually have, contact with other people, to organize, how do you deal with this situation?
Yeah, no, everything that you listed is completely accurate. And I want to plug in the South Bronx as a whole. Like I said earlier in the conversation, it's 97% people of color. A lot of frontline workers, a lot of delivery workers, a lot of people that don't have access to healthcare. We have a lot of people that work in the healthcare industry in the South Bronx that are also putting their lives on the front lines. So there's a lot of need. So if there's any moment in history that we need to continue to fight for universal healthcare as a human right that is not tied to a job, it is this moment right here, because this is what this pandemic is showing, that we need to embrace other ways of being, other paradigms that help us look at the world differently, because clearly the corporate capitalistic system that we have right now is not serving the community and the interests of the working class. And we have to continuously remind ourselves that we need to fight for a people's bailout. And we need to recognize that it's the frontline workers and that it's the workers in this country that create the wealth in this country. So we really need to, have a paradigm shift that, takes us from, point A to point B so that we can have our values align. And specifically in the Democratic Party, we need to reclaim the soul of the Democratic Party, which is our working class roots. And right now the party is being overtaken by corporate interests and lobbyists that have no regard for, the well-being of Americans. And right now what we're seeing is a lot of disaster capitalism, in this coronavirus response from the federal government all the way down. And in New York State right now, we're seeing the governor. I don't know if you heard the news, but he has cut Medicaid
Yes.
at a time where, we're facing a coronavirus, pandemic. So that's kind of like what we're dealing with here in the community. New York City right now is at the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak. So we need to honor the people, the frontline workers and workers in this country and like in our community specifically that keep our communities afloat. Because right now you have the elites that have their vacation homes upstate and in other places of the country, and that's where they're at because they want to protect themselves. But like working people don't have that choice. Working people still have to take the train. Working people still have to put like bread and butter on the table for their families. So they're risking their lives, sometimes even knowing that they may have symptoms because, they can't afford not to go a week without a paycheck. So we need a people's bailout. And I'm proud to be endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America as well as AOC and her Courage to Change PAC. And we're all aligned in that way. And those are the values that we're pushing for because the vast majority of Americans are making $30,000, $40,000 a year. So, in light of that, on March 19th, we released a set of coronavirus demands that you should check up on our website whenever you get a chance.
That's Lopez for the
South
people,
Bronx.
I should say.
I'm sorry? Yeah,
I should say that's LopezForThePeople.com.
See, yes. And so you should take a look at that. So on March 19th, we released a set of demands that center the South Bronx in this conversation around coronavirus. For all the issues that you and I have been talking about, the South Bronx has been disinvested in for decades. We've, again, faced a lot of environmental racism. We have one of the highest rates of asthma and respiratory illnesses in the country as a result. So already our community, because of this disinvestment and the redlining that we've experienced for decades, have put us in a very dire position, confronting COVID-19. So it's time to, demand like a different set of priorities to take root in the community that embodies the mutual aid principles of the Young Lords and the Black Panthers from back in the day. Because while the government gets its act together, we really have to rely on ourselves to be there for each other collectively so that we can survive at this time.
How
in
do
terms
you?
of what our campaign has been doing, we've shifted from door-to-door organizing, and now we are doing all of our organizing digitally. So that means Facebook ads. That means, reaching out to people with phone banking to check up on our neighbors and the people that we've already engaged in the door knocking phase to just say, hey, we're here. Like, it was great to meet you at the door a few months ago. We're checking in on you to see if you need anything, if you need food assistance, if you need, like errands or anything like that to be run if you're homebound. So we're using our campaign right now as a public service to check up on our constituents to make sure that they're okay. And we're also reminding them about the election and about Governor Cuomo's new executive order that was really a push from the activist community to provide, mail-in voting and absentee voting for everybody in New York State in light of what's going on with the coronavirus.
Well,
So
I got to tell you,
shifted entirely to the digital organizing space, and we're looking to do virtual town halls and keep checking up on our neighbors through phone banking and text banking.
Samelys, I got to say, when I went to your website, like I said, was LopezForThePeople.com, and I saw that one of your links, or one of basically your menu items is a mutual aid sign up. I was really impressed. It's great to see you using your campaign in that way. And folks obviously can head over there and get in touch with you, help by donating and by providing some of that mutual aid. Samelys
absolutely. That would be
Lopez.
amazing.
This, Samelys Lopez, the website is lopezforthepeople.com, running for Congress in New York's 15th district. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Oh, okay. Muchas gracias, Sam. And I look forward to meeting up with you in the Bronx if you ever decide to come up here and visit. You have a home here.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.